Thanks for joining me today for episode 27 of Business in the Bedroom, a bootstrapper's guide to doing it. I'm your host, producer Jemmy, providing practical advice for the newbie entrepreneur. And today I'm going to talk to you about using Google Suite services. This episode is brought to you by Flintstone Media. Listen in and let's do this. Already have a Gmail account? Well, guess what? You have a whole suite of powerful, free extra tools at your fingertips. I almost made this my last episode, but I decided to go with wraparound services instead. Then, funny enough, I had a consultation call with a podcaster, Kat Corchado, shout out to Kat, just 2 days after my last episode came out. And she asked me my advice about opening Excel files on a Mac. And all this stuff came up. So this episode is for you, Kat, okay? This episode is for you because Google Suite services stuff, all those apps and all that stuff that's in there when you're Google, well, it's great for if you have a Mac and people send you Word files like Excel spreadsheets. You don't actually have to have Microsoft Excel, but more on that in a minute. It's also great for you if you want to create graphics for free. Now, it's not Canva, okay? It's not even close to Canva. It's not Canva, but it is pretty good for creating infographics and things like that for free and in the same system that you're already working in. It's also great for if you have to create presentations. It's also great for collaboration. And as a tip for those of you who are co-moderating Clubhouse rooms, like I do a lot, or co-hosting podcasts, is that you can have a document open as a quote unquote chat with your co-mods or co-hosts. So that's an extra benefit. All right. So let's start with discussing the big three in the Google Suite services. Microsoft Word is called Docs. Their version in Google is called Docs. Microsoft Excel, the version in Google is called Sheets. And Microsoft PowerPoint, the Google version, is called Slides. Now, Docs and Slides pretty much have the same functionalities as Word and PowerPoint, respectively. Docs has all the basic formatting stuff. You can track changes, you can do word counts, things like that. And Slides has themes, it has transitions, you can animate stuff, all that good stuff, right? And for any functionalities that the Google service doesn't have, that the Microsoft program does have, there are some add-ons and things that you can implement into your Google Suite services and add some of those higher level tools right in. So it's pretty cool. Now, Google Sheets probably has the most functions from its Microsoft counterpart, Excel, missing from what I can tell. Now, I that could just be because I'm a bit of an Excel guru, whiz, snob, whatever word you like to use, okay? So I actually once got lost in a conversation about macro. Actually, this is a good story. Okay, so real quick. I got lost in a conversation once about macros. This is a really long time ago. It was one of my first jobs. I worked for Philips Electronics. Yep, the people who make the light bulbs and medical equipment and all that kind of stuff. But I was working in basically their payroll department, and I was working on a data sheet. And the office was right across the street from the mall. And so sometimes for my lunch break, if I didn't bring anything, I'd walk across the street and go to the food court and get something. So that was my plan for that day. And I was walking outside, and I don't even remember how a conversation got started, but there was a guy in my department standing outside. And for some reason, we started talking about Excel and macros, and we got into such a deep conversation about it. This is legit. This is a window into the weird brain of Jemmy. We got into such a deep conversation about it that before I knew it, I looked up and my whole entire hour lunch was gone. I didn't get to eat anything, and I had to spin right back around on my heels and walk my butt right back inside the office because I'm a geek for macros. So it's safe to say that I'm used to using a lot of the deep dive functionality of Excel. Like conditional formatting is light stuff for me, but conditional formatting, certain formulas, macros, like I've mentioned, certain functions with the tables and the graphs and such, some automation stuff. Like I've used all of that, right? I've gotten really, really used to using all of that. But you know what else? now that I'm using Sheets, I've also gotten used to some of that just not being there. And luckily enough, I'm no longer a data analyst, so it's okay that all of that stuff's not there. And I can actually manage just fine doing what I'm doing in my normal business stuff using Sheets. So chances are, unless you're doing crazy data stuff, data models, all that stuff, chances are you can probably get by with Sheets too. And one thing I'll say that does drive me a bit nuts, and this is where you have to let me geek out a little again. One thing that I used to do a lot in working with spreadsheets and looking for patterns in data and finding outliers and et cetera, et cetera. One thing that I used to do a lot in combination with each other is filtering for a data point. So filtering my Excel spreadsheet for all accounts where a client's state was New York, for example. Okay. And then the second thing that I used to pair it with so often, it was very, very useful, was then being able to change the value of a particular field. So AKA in an Excel spreadsheet, a particular column for all of those filtered records. So let's say I wanted to change the status of all the people in New York to pending, from active to pending. So I just, in the top row under that first New York person in that column, I'd say change active to pending. And then all I would have to do is use a simple fill down function using Control D and just fill all the ones down below it. It was so easy. But in Sheets, the fill down function only works when the rows are adjacent to each other. So I get an error when I try to fill down on a filtered data set in Sheets. And that was something that I really, really miss being able to do super easily in Excel. Okay, for all of you with your eyes sufficiently glazed over, I'm moving on, okay? I'm moving on. So I wanted to share what I like about using Google Suites, like in general. And these are all kind of hot tips along the way in this list, right? Okay, so like I said at the top of the episode, if you have a Mac and you are sent a Microsoft file, like a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet, or a PowerPoint presentation, you can open them right in Google. It's so easy. So simply like take the file and drag it and drop it into your Google Drive, right? So if you open up your Gmail account, there is a grid of dots in the upper right-hand corner, right? Should be right next to your face, your profile name. And there's a grid of 9 dots. It looks like you could dial them on a telephone, right? You click on that and it opens up all the apps. And there's one app there called Google Drive. It looks kind of like a triangle with the Google colors. So you just open that up and voila, there's your Google Drive. So anyways, once you're in your Google Drive, take whatever the file is that someone sent you in an email or whatever, it's on your computer, whatever it is, and just drag it and just drop it into Google Drive. Then once it's in there, just right click on it and choose the option to open it in the appropriate Google service. So Google Docs, Google Sheets, or Google Slides. So that's the first cool thing about it. The next cool thing is that it's also super easy to save docs as PDFs. And a pro tip is that you can create pretty dynamic PDFs and slides too. So whether you're creating them in docs, like a Word document, but Google Docs, or in slides, using a presentation, but instead it's using one slide or multiple slides and creating something, you can then easily save that as a PDF. It's really, really simple. Now, I've mostly moved on to using a pro account in Canva to make some of my templates and things like that these days. But for a long time, for a very, very long time, Google Slides especially really, really kept me going. And as far as being able to put things together, nice graphics, proposals that looked really good. So Google Slides is a really, really great tool to create that stuff. And you can easily save those as PDFs. All right. So this next one is probably my favorite from a keeping my sanity standpoint. Now, I remember having so many different drafts of my resume or my work documents passed back and forth to colleagues. Now, my work resume was not passed back and forth, but the documents were. And, all that stuff eventually starts to pile up with all the different versions that you have in your files. And you might remember to date them and label them, blah, 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 blah. But it's just constantly still trying to have to always wonder, if what you're getting back has been altered after, since you sent it, or if it's the correct version that you're pulling that you're going to send. And it can be a little bit stressful having to keep all of that straight and being able to have, access to old versions and new versions and blah, 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 blah. So the fact is that you can actually work in the Google. So let's just use Google Docs as an example. You can actually work on the same file with other people without having to endlessly keep track of which is the most recent version, because there's only one version. So with Docs, for example, you can work on meeting prep notes in real time with your business partner or whatever together. Like, you can actually see what each other is doing and typing on the screen. Is pretty fun. Or if you're working on something separately and you are, passing the football back and forth, so to speak, then you can leave comments for each other and notes for each other to review and to resolve or give more feedback on or whatever, like right there in the document. So it's pretty cool. So from a collaboration standpoint and from an organization of drafts and versions of things standpoint, like, this element of Google Suite's functionality really, really has helped me regain a lot of my sanity in working from the business admin stuff. Oh my goodness. And it's all because it's one single document that evolves. It's like a living version of the work rather than a collection of static snapshots of the work in progress. In fact, because of this feature and because it's a cloud system, you can actually leave your laptop at home or in your bag when heading out to do a presentation at an event or whatever. So if you're a public speaker and you're listening to this, or you have a presentation to a conference or whatever you're doing, you can actually just leave that at home and log back into your Google account when you get wherever you're going and pull up your presentation right there. Now, huge caveat that shall not be overlooked. You want to be really, really confident that using their computer system will actually even be an option. That'll work, and that'll be connected to the internet, and that you'll be able to actually log into your Google account and be able to pull it up. Like, you want to make sure that you can do that. But it's just cool that you can do that, right? And you may still want to do what I do and bring your laptop with you just in case. All right. Trust me, you don't want to learn that lesson the hard way. And this next benefit of the Google Suite of tools is probably next in line for helping me keep my sanity too. Like, seriously. So Google essentially has a go back function. It's like a time machine, y'all. You can actually go back and look at what a document had in it in the past. What? Yes, you can. Just go to File and then Version History, and then click on See Version History. And you can click back to like all the various versions of that document. It's so awesome. And a little tip wrapped up in this tip. So whether you're working in a doc, a sheet, a slide, or whatever, if there was something that you remember had been in a past version of it, like let's say you're in a slide and it's a table that had been back in the day, or it's a document and something, a way that you phrase something in a paragraph. You're like, oh man, I wish I could go back in time and not have to reinvent the wheel and just go back and grab that. And I wish I could do that. Well, you can, because what you can do is you can actually revert back to a version of that file that had that element. So like, if you can kind of remember in your mind what the date was and when it existed, just go back to a version around that time and find it, and then select whatever that element is, that table, that paragraph, whatever it is, and then copy it, right? Then go back to the future to your actual current version and paste it in. Voila! It's so easy. And so that's a little extra tip inside a tip, okay? And it's also super easy. This is the next thing I really love about the Google Suite system. I'm getting really jazzed. I really like this stuff. So it's also super easy to pull stuff in. Like, everything in your Google system will really work seamlessly together. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. You can be working on a presentation and want to use a certain image you have saved in your Google Drive. Well, in the option to insert an image, you can actually choose to pull straight from your Google Drive. So unlike let's say Dropbox, where you would have to download it to your computer and then upload it into PowerPoint, you can actually just within your Google Slides presentation, just select to insert it directly from your Google Drive. It's so nice. Another example that is extremely useful is if you get a bunch of images, for example, sent to you in your email. So anytime you get a file in your email, this is super useful. So in this images example, those images never have to touch your computer. They don't have to eat up your precious local drive space, like none of that. So in Gmail, when you hover over the image or the document or the spreadsheet that's attached or whatever the file that you've been sent, there's a little icon that pops up. It's that same little triangle that I mentioned before. And it kind of looks like a little triangle with a little plus sign in the corner of it. Now you'll see a little plus sign there. Well, if you click on that, you can actually save it directly into your Google Drive and even hit organize, this little link that pops up. It says organize. You can hit that link and navigate to any particular folder or location on your Google Drive and save it right there. It is literally just so easy. It's like ridiculously easy. Okay, another random thing that I like about Google Drive, and geez, am I getting paid for this? I should be. Good Lord. I'm going to send this to a friend at Google. Another random thing I like about Google Drive is, let's say you have a folder of files on your computer that you want in Google Drive. So you might have a collection of, okay, this is a great example. I just had to share a whole bunch of pictures about from old Podfest events. And because I'm now co-hosting a show called the Podfest Podcast, I should put a link in the show notes for that. I will. And so I'm co-hosting that. And so my co-host is Glenn the Geek from Horse Radio Network. And I had a collection of old Podfest event photos on my computer. And so we have now a shared folder in Google Drive. So instead of going there and then creating a folder and then dragging all the images in, it's actually one step easier than that. So it's like, seriously, everything is super easy peasy with Google. What I did was I was able to just drag that file, the whole folder on my local drive, just drag it and drop it, entire folder into the location that I wanted in our shared folder for the Podfest podcast and our Google Drive. And guess what? Drive created the folder for me with the same name and put all the files right there in it. Like I said, easy peasy. Plus, as I've mentioned, your files in Drive don't eat up space on your local system. So for me, that is huge. A huge plus over some of the other cloud sharing services that I have used in the past. And one other thing I really like is how much control you have over what you share with people. So one habit that I've implemented is in Drive, having a shared folder. As I've just mentioned, I have a shared folder with Glenn, the Geek, my co-host for the Podfest podcast. So actually, one thing I've done for my clients is also have a shared folder as a subfolder for all of them. Okay. What? That was probably very confusing. Let me explain. I have a folder in Drive simply called Clients. And there are several subfolders in there, one for each Flintstone Media client. So there's a subfolder for Mark Ainley and Tom Shallcross, the guys from team of Straight Up Chicago Investor. Then there's another folder for the Evernest crew. The list goes on. The folder for the American Constitution Society, they have a folder. Well, the stuff in each client's main folder is for my eyes and my eyes only. Thank you very much. It's all in my own internal FSM documents, all that stuff that relates to that client. Then I have a folder in each client's folder named something like FSM, stands for Flintstone Media, FSM shared folder with, and then the client's name. So FSM shared folder with Team Suchi, or FSM shared folder with American Constitution Society, or whatever, right? And everything in that folder is the stuff that I want to share with my client, and my client wants to share with me. So many eyes can be on the contents in the client shared folder, and I give access to that folder to my team and to the client and to whomever else the client wants to provide access for. But this just allows for really easy sharing. So if they have to send me stuff, again, they don't have to clog up their emails or my local anything. They can just upload it straight into that shared folder and I have access to it immediately. So that is a very long list of wonderful things that Google Suite offers, but also a very long list of wonderful ways to use it. And guess what? If you already have Gmail, it's free. And guess what else? If you don't have Gmail, Gmail is free. So no matter what, it's free. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast today. I'm assuming you're listening to this because you're either running a business in your bedroom or you're thinking about it. So I and your fellow listeners want you to be part of our conversation. So pop into Clubhouse and join us. We support each other's dreams and goals, and I answer questions. And we are never short of blessed with people making amazing connections in those rooms. So look for my Dreamers Become Doers Club on Clubhouse. And please be sure to also now find the Dreamers Become Doers group on the Goodpods app. Woohoo! Goodpods is my new favorite podcast player. And you can also now follow me on there at Producer Jemmy as well. I'm absolutely loving Goodpods. And seriously, it's become my favorite podcast player. Imagine that Facebook and your favorite podcast player got together, had a couple drinks, had a good time, and had a baby. All right? Imagine that. And yeah, that's pretty much Goodpods. And it makes it really, really easy to discover what your friends are listening to, for you to share what you're listening to, and then for everybody to just have an awesome party in there listening to each other's favorite shows right there in the same app. It's pretty awesome. And you can create your own list, your own groups. It's pretty cool. So that's Goodpods. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes too. And please reach out to me and let me help you on your journey from being a dreamer to becoming a doer. You can leave me a message or find my email address and all social media handles at bizinthebedroom.com. That's BIZinthebedroom.com. And remember, what do I always say? Hit it hard. Keep the lights on.